look or put your favorite sports team front and center. Captain T's Upholstery is who to call. 352-369-1810. That's 352-369-1810. Or stop by their location, 5030 South Pine Avenue in Ocala, just past the drive-in. And of course, don't forget to visit them on the web, CaptainTUpholstery.com.
The very best in quality is Captain T's Upholstery.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
Minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. In today's world, when there is a correspondent for the news, they are on this high-definition TV, and you can see them, you can hear the tone of their voice, you can see the fear in their faces if they're in a fearful situation, whether it's weather or war. You can see what's going on behind them. There's so much information that we get just by looking at the visual, or even just listening to the audio if it happens to be a radio broadcast, that you sort of feel like you get to know the person who is the correspondent. And I'm sure you can think of many, many correspondents that would apply to. Before there was so much broadcastability, whether it's TV or radio, and when it was all in print, the words that you read, you really didn't see the person behind those words. You really didn't get to know that person, let alone get to know if the person you're reading a story from on page 1 is somehow involved with the person that you're reading who wrote the article on page 2. And in fact, maybe in many cases, you'd never even looked at the byline to see who was writing what. But we have a story right here that I think is going to touch everyone. The book is called Eve of 100 Midnights. It is written by Bill Lascher. He's on the phone. He's a contributor to public radio, so he knows radio very well. He's a best-selling author, obviously, a photographer. This story, the subtitle to the book, Eve of 100 Midnights, is the star-crossed love story of two World War II correspondents and their epic escape across the Pacific. And, well, I just want to hear more now that I know that much. Bill Lascher, good morning, sir. Thank you for being on the air with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
And the two people we're talking about in the book, who are they?
They're Melville and Annalie Jacoby. They were correspondents during World War II, actually in China and the Philippines, even before the U.S. entered the war. Mel was there as an exchange student in 1936 and into 37 when Japan invaded China. So they spent a lot of time out there. And Mel, the added bonus is that Mel was my grandmother's cousin, so my cousin twice removed.
Is that right? And is that how you became interested in this story or even knew about it?
Yeah, more or less. You know, I'd wanted to be a journalist ever since I was in high school, but it wasn't until I'd really started my career as a journalist in my mid-20s. I was probably about 25 years old, got my first full-time job as a journalist, and my grandmother was moving, and she was clearing out some old stuff from her house, and she found this old weathered box, and she looked inside, and she knew I should have what was inside, and she said, next time she saw me, she said, "Bill, I'd like you to have this." And I opened it up, and it was this old, gorgeous Corona 4 typewriter, black with gold leaf. And I looked at it, and she said, "Yeah, it belonged to my cousin, the war correspondent." And I thought to myself, cousin, a war correspondent? I've never heard of him. So that really started me wanting to know more about who this man was and why he was so important both to our family and to journalism in the world.
Wow. Forgive me for not knowing this, and forgive me if this distracts a little bit from the story, but I just am curious. How did the logistics of being a correspondent work back then? You typed on a typewriter in China. How did you get that to the Associated Press or any other agency?
Well, there's a couple different ways, and it all depended on sort of the conditions and what maybe war had blocked off or not. So there would be typewritten sort of update summaries that would give maybe the day's news short, and then it would be sent by shortwave radio to receivers usually in California. In fact, in my hometown, there was a dentist who worked as a ham radio operator who'd receive some of these broadcasts. And then they'd be transcribed. Someone would read it on the air and then transcribe it. That was one way. Getting a little more. Sometimes stuff would be sent by telegram or shorter briefs about like what's just happened. Otherwise, if maybe it was a longer, more in-depth feature, it would be written up, typed up, and put on in airmail. So maybe sent on the next plane out of the city to be sort of forwarded on from a more central place. In China, for example, during the war, the capital for the Free Chinese was a town called Chongqing. We probably have seen it back then as Chongqing, and it was back in southwest China, but the Japanese had occupied the whole coast, so people had to fly news and other material like that out of there.
So let's get back to the story now. This is a love story, and were the two Mel and Annalie, were they married in the beginning of the story?
No, and in fact, they weren't even close in the beginning of the story. They had gone to Stanford at the same time, or roughly the same time. She was a year ahead of him, but they didn't know each other too well. But what had happened was Mel had been going to China first as an exchange student, and then he went as a freelance journalist, and then he came back and was looking to get back one more time. And on this last trip home, Annalie, who had been a screenwriter for MGM after kind of writing a script for the Andy Hardy series in the day, she wanted to do something a little bit more serious. And so she looked him up, and because she had heard he'd been in China, and she knew that the war was going on there and wanted to find out a little bit more about how to get out there and who he might know. And since he knew people in college, they went and had a drink together in Los Angeles while he was home, and they instantly were more intellectually attracted to one another. And then it became a romance once she came out to China, and they two found themselves sort of working side by side. First, she was a speechwriter for Madame Chiang Kai-shek before she was a journalist.
Wow.
He had known that government. Yeah.
Wow. And so then trouble came. The Japanese were threatening the area, and of course they wouldn't have been spared. I'm guessing. So how did they get away from that?
Well, I mean, that's probably the heart of the story. They went to Manila because Mel had been transferred there by Time magazine because they knew the war was coming, and he had proposed to her, and so she came along after she could finally kind of hide her, finish her work up. And she was on one of the last planes out of China to get to Manila. They got married a week before Pearl Harbor, and then when Pearl Harbor happened, they started reporting the war until they were in danger because the Japanese were about to take over the city of Manila. They knew that they'd reported critically about the Japanese, and so they could possibly be executed if they stayed. So they talked to everyone they knew, and they found some ship captains who were clearing out the city and were going to leave on the last boat that left Manila before it was captured. And they ran to the docks at midnight on New Year's Eve, 1941, and jumped onto the boat as the docks were on fire and sailed off into the darkness, unsure where they were going.
It's a movie scene right there.
You evidently had to do a lot of interviews for the book. How close to the family members did you get to do the interview, and how would they trust you?
I just would try to take my time with people. I spoke to many children of people that were connected. Most of the people connected to the story are not alive. I was able to meet one of the friends of Melville Jacoby from when he was an exchange student. He was 97 years old at the time. Mainly, I just told them that I was serious. I told them what I knew about the story, and that I would kind of work at their speed and let them sort of ask me any questions they had about my intentions and what I wanted to work. And I think they all knew that there were stories not just about Mel and Annalie, but about some of the other people involved that were worth telling, and that had been sort of forgotten over the last 75 years.
Are you a romantic at heart?
Oh, yeah, I definitely am.
I am too. And I actually think I learn more about a time period, whether it's a war or anything else, when there is a story of human beings. It doesn't have to be a romantic story, but just a human story. I think that draws me to understand the time frame more of what was going on in the world, or in that particular part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I feel similar, and we have a great fortune in all of the things like archives that are at universities, and some of the things that the National Archives and the libraries, Library of Congress collects, and some other special collections where people's personal papers, their letters, their photographs, even sometimes their diaries, are preserved and kept by historians, and being able to look at some of that stuff and get a feel for what people were really motivated by and thinking about, you realize that there were so many passions and so many characters that were doing this that, you know, I could have probably written this book about a lot of other people if I really thought about it, although I don't think anyone was in as many scrapes and as many moments where they're crossing history as Mel and Annalie.
How did you feel personally when you were actually reading the letters that were penned by them? That had to have been a really breathtaking experience.
Yeah, it truly was. I was fortunate also that my grandmother had kept all the letters that Mel had sent his mother and then had passed to her hand. So I got to feel what, it was as close as I could come to talking to these people and to really meeting them and understanding how they felt. And it was breathtaking. I mean, I wanted more, although I always wanted to ask, well, what did you mean by this? And who was this? And,
yeah, I would imagine that. In fact, I'm wondering, did you have to fill in the blanks sometimes, just like take your best guess at something? I'm guessing there were some gaps that you just didn't have any way of knowing the answer to.
Yeah, I mean, I tried as hard as I could to fill those gaps with as many resources as possible. And that's why I spent 4 years on it, and that's why I did as much research as I could. And why it was really hard to just start writing and stop researching was because I didn't want to make stuff up. I wanted to, to be as a journalist, I just wanted it to be, as accurate as I could. So what I tried to do was get it from as many angles as possible. So I was creating sort of a relief if I didn't have the actual picture. And that worked for the most part. I went to China and I went to the Philippines and, tried to really feel what things would look like and how things would be.
Really? Oh, that is awesome. I love the title. I don't understand it, though. Explain the title.
Well, the title was something that took a lot of work, and it took a lot of discussion between myself and my editor. And I think its intention is to not say too much about the story, but to realize that there's this really incredible moment that's looming of uncertainty and of course darkness, just in a metaphorical sense, but even in a somewhat literal sense. Mel and Annalie left at midnight, and they spent the next couple months sailing, through the Philippines and then the Pacific, traveling by night and hiding out by day. And it's just a moment of being sort of on the edge of something and not knowing what's going to come next. I think that sort of works.
Yeah, I see a movie ahead somewhere. I don't know if you want that or not, but I see a movie.
This would be great.
Bill Lascher is our guest. Bill, we have to take a little break if you don't mind, and we will be back after the break, though, so don't go away. The book is called Eve of 100 Midnights. It's the true story of, let me get it right, Mel and Annalie Jacoby, and the star-crossed love story of two World War II correspondents and their epic escape across the Pacific. We'll be right back with Bill Lascher after the break. This is The Source, WOCA.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. Some sunshine today with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm around into the evening hours. Our high today, 89 to 93. Partly cloudy overnight, low 72 to 76. For tomorrow, intervals of clouds and sun with a couple of showers and thunderstorms around mainly during the afternoon hours, the high 88 to 92. And on Friday, clouds and some sun with a couple of showers and a heavier thunderstorm, the high 88 to 92. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
This Saturday, July 9th, the Appleton Museum of Art will be open all day, free of charge, for Museum Day 2016. Community members of all ages are invited to see the exhibitions, including Norman Rockwell, the man behind the canvas. Make art in the art space and watch films in the auditorium from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. with no admission fees. The Appleton is located at 4333 East Silver Springs Boulevard. Call 352-291-4455 for more information. Veterans are the foundation upon which our freedom is built. Listen to The Source, WOCA, each Thursday at 9 a.m. to Veterans News with Hank Whittier from Vets Helping Vets. You'll hear tributes, information on veterans issues, and stories that will make you laugh, cry, and feel proud. Veterans News always focuses on the military, past and present, and on our first responders. Veterans News is brought to you each week by Bob Wine's Camellia Gardens and Nursery, keeping you blooming since 1952.
Here's what you may have missed on the John Tesh Radio Show.
Place the back of your hand on the ground. If you can't hold it for 5 seconds, it's too hot for your dog to walk on. Good skin bacteria can improve our appearance, apparently, and relieve conditions like acne and psoriasis. Women want men who are willing to open up and share themselves. So include some action photos that show off your passions. Shots of you hiking, playing piano, playing softball with your buddies.
Intelligence for your life on the John Tesh Radio Show. Don't miss this stuff.
Need to sell your house? Discover how to easily sell your house fast and for full price in today's market. Join us live this Friday, 9:30 a.m. for Mr. Ocala Real Estate Today. Sell your house now. Full price, fast close. Guaranteed. Call 352-282-3080. 352-282-3080. And join us live right here, 9:30 a.m. Friday.
WWOCA, WWOCA.
20 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. The book we are talking about is titled Eve of 100 Midnights, the star-crossed love story of two World War II correspondents and their epic escape across the Pacific. It's a true story. Bill Lascher is the author, and he's on the phone with us. Bill, thank you for staying with us through the break and for being on the air in the first place. When did the book come out?
It just came out last week on the 21st, so it's brand new.
Okay, and I guess I don't know this, and I feel a little bit awkward asking it, but are they both still around, or did they die?
No, Mel died when he was quite young, and Anna Lee passed away in 2002. So she lived quite a long time.
Oh, okay. So when did he die?
That's probably a key moment in something I'd like to, I think readers would like.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it is. It's not a novel, but at the same time, we don't want to give away everything. Okay, I got you. But I guess just knowing that, I guess that makes it even more romantic in a melancholy kind of a way, doesn't it? Knowing that they didn't have a long life together.
They sure didn't. But the time that they had together, and I think this is also what readers will discover, is incredibly full of life and full of love and passionate, and it's the kind of romance that I think we can all hope to have. We talked about being romantic. So every second is full of connection and then purpose. Because they were both working at the same time, they felt a real bond in doing their work together and alongside one another. So I think it was a tremendous romance in that sense. And she definitely, Anna Lee ended up getting remarried, but she still, in some parts of herself, thought about that time forever.
They must have been each other's cheerleader, because sometimes when people are in the same business, there's a little jealousy that abounds, but they must have had such deep love and respect for each other that they encouraged each other.
They absolutely did, and I think that's an important piece of it, was that they wanted one another to succeed, and I think that was sort of the moment of their romance, was that was the part that really brought them together. They had been attracted to other people and dated other people, but what connected them was the fact that they were each so great at their jobs.
The book itself is derived from the blog that you kept, am I right?
More or less. What was happening was I started thinking I wanted to do it, but a long time ago, as I would talk to my grandmother about this story, we kept saying, "Oh, we should do a book about this. I should do a book about this," and then eventually it got to be a point where I said, I kept putting it aside for other projects, and so I decided, okay, now's the time to write a book. So I first proposed it as a Kickstarter. When Kickstarter was sort of a new thing, I said, get a bunch of friends together to help me self-publish it. But then I realized I really needed the professionalism that a real book entails, working with a good editor, having an agent that helps advocate for me and find stuff. So the blog was somewhere where I'd write about it as I was working on the project. But I did turn some of those, areas I went to into, source for the, areas that I'd pursue a little deeper in the book.
And so I kind of wanted to touch on that, because you did travel to do this, as you mentioned in the first part of the interview. So what was that like for you? I mean, aside from being in the same place, obviously being not in the same time, things have changed in the world, but were you still able to, I guess, immerse yourself in the culture to the point where you could at least imagine what it was like back in the 40s?
Yeah, I think I could. I spent a great deal of time, well, as much time as I could. Once I realized it was going to be possible for me to travel there, I acted up somewhat quickly, and I looked up. I tried to do as best I could of finding specific locations in the stories, which was hard to do because there weren't like addresses mentioned. And especially in a place like Chongqing, the wartime capital of China, this is a city that is now, 7 million people or something like that, and incredibly fast, quickly developing and tearing down the history at a rapid pace. So it took a lot of looking at finding old maps to see how things overlaid onto current maps and finding but I really did get a feel for it. Fortunately, in that city, there's a really deep and there is a core group of people, not a deep group, but there are some people who really want to return and remember that part of their history. And so there were people that could help me out. And then in the Philippines, I went quickly through the Philippines, but they went quickly through the Philippines when they were on the run. And I think having to rush through it gave me a sense of the sort of urgency that they were feeling. And at least in the physicality of some of the places, especially outside of Manila, I could really get I even went to the hotel where they had their honeymoon. And
so were you alone? Were you totally alone?
I was alone. I made friends in various places, but I was traveling alone.
Did you fall in love? Real personal question.
Not on that trip. I have since, but not on that.
When you were talking about the last boat out of Manila Harbor on New Year's Eve in 1941, when you say boat, was it like a freighter, or what kind of boat was it?
Yeah, it was a small freighter. It's like a tugboat, really. It was a ship that had been used by. It had been commissioned by the Army, but was a private, shipping vessel that the Army Transportation Service was using to tug larger ships out of the Manila Harbor, so that into the Manila Harbor from the Pasig River, so that as Japanese bombers came in and tried to target these ships, they would not target them over the city and possibly hit sensitive targets and population centers with errant bombs. And so it had been used as a freight. So it was a tiny little ship.
Oh, okay.
Did you feel an obligation to, like if you discovered something that was less than flattering about the two, did you feel an obligation to tell it, or did you feel like let's spare the family from this, or did nothing like that come up?
I mean, there wasn't too much of that came up there, but I did feel that it was important to be open to negative situations, and I don't know if it was because Mel died young or people were really fond of him. I didn't find too much criticism of him and his work, but I really tried to look for things that weren't that would keep me from putting him up on a pedestal.
When they make the movie about this, and I'm not saying they are, I'm just doing this. But when they do, are we going to see the movie as you've written it, or will we see like how they did with Titanic? You know how they did the story, but they also showed the guys now. Like, so will we see you riding, listening to Bon Jovi as you're doing your research, as well as the story behind that you eventually wrote?
Yeah, I mean, if they saw me, it would probably be Portishead and U2. But but I think that I think that I'm going to leave that up to a filmmaker to figure out what they think would be best, because it's sort of a different medium and it's a different.
Yeah. That's how I would do it if I was a filmmaker.
I also think it would be great for a. I think there are so many other characters involved. I think it would be great for a Netflix series too. So. We'll see.
Well, good luck with it, Bill. I really can't wait to read it myself. I think Robin told you we don't have the book yet. So for the listeners, usually at the end of the interview, we will give away the copy that we received. So when I get it, I will do that, though.
It's en route,
so you have to pay attention, because I'll probably give it away and it'll be disjointed from whatever else we're talking about. Bill Lascher, let's see. How do we buy the book? Do you have a website?
Yeah, it's eveof100midnights.com, and there's a link there. There's a Shop Now link there to my publisher's website. It's also on all the major online websites and probably at local chain bookstores and things like that.
Yeah. What a wonderful story. And gosh, it was like a gift that you've given not only to us, but I'm sure to the family of those people who are related to Annalie and Mel. Thank you for being on the air with us today, Bill. That was a great interview.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll be right back.